how are we doing today, Tom?
Oh, yes, we're all right. And not at all filled with dread and apprehension.
Is that just in general, or because this week you are in the hot seat having questions fired at you?
And it is a hot seat because my air conditioning is broken in my office. So, yeah, it's every single factor that you would possibly not want when you're being interviewed has happened to me. It's like, I feel now like I'm like the least ready guest ever.
Good stuff.
So, yeah, it's a solid start.
Solid start. Well,
But yeah, no, looking forward to it.
yeah. So for our listeners,
Sort of.
we got asked by our patrons to put together some episodes where we kind of introduced ourselves again, I guess. It's been interesting going back. I had to go back recently and listen to a few of the early kind of episodes that we've done, which was particularly cringy. But equally interesting because obviously our format has changed quite a bit. And I believe we kind of did similar kind of things very early on when we were recording, but we're now at episode 85. So yeah, definitely worth revisiting. So there's a lot to get through on this episode. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to jump straight into it with the questions that we have. And towards the end, if we've got time, we've got some questions from our patrons that I'd like to put to you as well. And they are coming in thick and fast in the WhatsApp group. So
Okay, I can deal with that.
we'll see how well we can get through them. So to start with, I guess, Tom, introduce yourself. What made you want to become a photographer? Where did it all begin?
Yeah, yes, I'm Tom Barnes, and I think I really became a photographer just so I could start a podcast when a pandemic hit the world. That was really my driving factor, I think. No, I started really young. I was given the family camera at kind of like family get-togethers, mainly because I don't know if my dad wanted pictures or, just was like, oh, there's something for the kids to do. But I would take it and run with it. And when the pictures got developed, they were like, well, actually, they're all right. So, and then obviously when you're 5 years old and your parents go, oh, you're really good at that. You go, wow, really? I should do that for a career. And that was basically the start of my career. I then I wasn't at all musical, and so when friends of mine were playing in bands, I couldn't play any instruments. I tried bass, still try bass every now and then, but the thing that really got me was that I could go to the shows and photograph all my friends in bands with my camera, and then that was that. I kind of what's the right way of putting it? I maybe got a little distracted at college. And then when I moved to Sheffield to do a degree in economics, I suddenly found that I had tons and tons of time on my hand and complete freedom to go off into the Peak District and take photos for the day. Or I would get up at 2:00 in the morning and go and shoot, light trails of taxis going around roundabouts. And I suddenly was just like, wow, this is actually amazing. I've got all this freedom to do the thing I really love. And then I went to a gig in Sheffield, and it changed the course of my career immeasurably. That one show, it was a band who I watched, and I thought, I've watched a lot of bands by that point. I was like, oh, there's something about these guys. And so I reached out to them on MySpace and said, hey, we should do press shots. And they were like, what are press shots? And I was like, I don't know. We should do some. And then that's basically how my career in music photography properly began. They started touring in the UK, so I started touring with them, and then they started touring all over the world. So I joined them for bits. And then because I was working with them, there were other bands that reached out to me, and me and a couple of other photographers, I guess, were responsible for creating a look and creating this. It was an entirely new scene that was being created, and we were kind of the image creators within it. And that was basically how my career kind of kicked off.
Wow. So was that one of your first kind of paid gigs? Was once you'd gone and shot the band? Was it music photography, or was there earlier paid gigs?
No, that was, I didn't realize you could get paid for it.
How many years, Tom, did you?
Well, to be honest, I'm
Up
40
until
now,
last
so
year.
it was 38, yeah. No, it was, I realized quite early on in music, but it was, I don't know, it was a bizarre start because I was friends with this band, and then they signed to a label, and the label started paying me. And then, I worked with a merch company, or there was a clothing company, and then it all kind of picked up from there. Kind of suddenly it went from, I found my first ever invoice that I charged a band when I was 18, and I didn't know what to charge. I didn't have a clue. And I found my first ever invoice number one, right? 2 hours, and I charged them an hourly rate of £10. Because I was like, what's the minimum wage? Well, I'll just charge a bit more than that. And then that was how I started.
Fair
I
enough.
realize now how foolish that was. But I then realized quite quickly how to charge bands properly, or as
I have to
as
say
properly
one
as I could.
one thing to go back to your invoice number one. One thing I always did when I first started was I think I started on invoice 500 or something.
Oh, did you? Yeah, I mean that should have been the thing. I think I reset. I did actually do that in year 2 or 3 when I moved to a new finance software. They were like, "What number do you want to start on?" And I was like, "Ooh, 370 something." Because then obviously made it look like you've been in business way longer
Yeah.
than you actually had done, rather than invoice 7.
So when was the first time you felt you kind of made it as a photographer? Like your kind of first milestone, I guess.
I remember, because obviously I was still studying property. I was doing a property economics degree in Sheffield at this point, and I remember opening up. We were going on a field trip, bizarrely, to Barcelona, and I remember being on the plane and opening Photography Monthly. Now, do you remember that? The magazine?
Sorry. Yeah, I do remember that. Yep. Yeah.
It looked like you just never remembered a magazine. No,
No.
so Photography Monthly, and I remember the editor at the time was a very lovely chap called Adam Scory, and I'll never forget this because Adam had rung me and he'd said, "We'd like to publish a picture you'd taken," and I remember it being of a guy jumping on a dirt bike or something, because I'd gone one summer, I think, the summer before, I just gone off with friends who rode bikes and had taken this picture on a Fuji Finepix S7000 camera. In case anyone's wondering what I started shooting on professionally, professionally being the loosest term.
Is that a bridge camera?
It was a
As they
bridge
call,
camera, yeah.
as they call them
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, you remember that term. But and I remember being on the plane, surrounded by all my uni classmates, and they were like, "So you're a photographer?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's really what I want to do. The property thing's not really my bag." I was not massively interested in it. And they were like, "What sort of thing do you do?" And I remember kind of being like, "Well, this magazine," and I opened it up, and it was a full double page spread, which I'd never seen before. I'd never had that of an image, and they'd done a feature on me, and it was like, "Hey, this is a photographer, Tom Barnes." Actually, do you know what's mad? Do you want to? Let's go right back. Ready? Watch this. In preparation, in preparation for this, guess what I found?
Is it your first portfolio or something?
Portfolio 1 Genesis. Ready? And it is a leather zip folio that I got from Staples in Sheffield. And it is genuinely one of the wildest things you'll ever look through. Well, loads of posters from when I was working with bands. Some classic magazine covers that I shot. Yeah.
Nice.
And hang on, is that it? No. So, because obviously when you start your career, I didn't know what I wanted to be. So apparently the first picture was something I took in Cornwall, a landscape. And
Okay.
then the second picture was some flowers.
Some nice sunflowers. I can't tell
Thanks.
if they're black and white or if they're colour.
We'll go with black and white because the color is awful on them. There's a bee in here, which is
Okay.
good. And then when you go past all these nature shots for some reason, you end up in this territory. So, and I think I might actually be able to show you. Yeah, look, here it is. Here is the shot I'm talking about, right? So that was it. and it's obviously in just like a cheap rubbish document thing. But here we go.
I'm trying to work out what it is. Is it somebody on a
Oh,
bike doing a
it's a guy.
stunt?
I'm trying to not get. So yeah, so he was jumping and he'd done a full, like, he just jumped off the bike, and that was the stunt, right? And that was the moment I caught. And it here published April 2005, Practical Photography, and then published in May 2005, Photography Monthly. And I had kind of thought that was so cool. I printed out the stickers and put them on the work in my portfolio. And do you know what's mad about this portfolio is I kept the pad, I kept the writing pad at the back, you know, for those all important meetings that I definitely wasn't getting
That's
at
a
the
nice,
time.
actually quite a good little touch. I remember having something in Practical Photography or Photography Monthly, one of them, with won a competition with a picture of a fork,
Picture of a fork.
an arty picture of a fork. Yeah.
Do you want to see an arty picture that won me a Fuji camera?
Oh, wow.
These is gummy bears that were all surrounding a different gummy bear that had been killed in the middle and been decapitated. so,
Wow.
so if
Why is
anyone
that not
wonders,
still in your portfolio?
well, right. But if anyone, so I wasn't actually going to show you all of this because some of it
That
is
should be your link on your
so shocking.
website. Your bio
But
line should just be gummy bear photographer.
but you remember when I told you there was long exposure pictures of taxis? Well, this was one, but again, published in May 2005 in Photography Monthly. And it was so funny going back through this because obviously it goes from flowers to then photographs of bands.
Yeah.
And then, you know, this one again was published in Photography Monthly. I'm trying to see if I actually took a, but it's such a mad, I mean, 20 years ago, I clearly had no idea what I was doing. And I'm so glad that 20 years later, it's still a thing. Oh look! Oh my God! No, I do have it. Oh my God! I have it. Look. So this was the port. So they
So
featured me.
describe it for listeners who aren't watching this on YouTube.
I'd rather not. I'd rather not. But they. So let me just say. So this was because remember we're back on the plane. Let me take you back to this EasyJet flight to Barcelona, and we're all. And I'd done a chat with the guys at the magazine, but I didn't think anything from it. And I remember I had written to them. I
Right.
had literally written to the magazine. I was like, "These are some pictures. What do you think?" And I had included a CD of the images. Like, and then they rung me, had a chat, and I was like, "That was a nice chat. I wonder what that was for." And then the following month, when I'm on the flight, people are like, "What sort of photography do you do?" And I'd opened up Photography Monthly, and there was this big. I don't even know how many pages it was. Yeah, it was what, 5 pages, and that was the front cover of it. And I remember going, "Oh, that's cool. I might do this as a career."
Yeah.
And then
It's funny because actually, like those early magazines, Digital Photographer, Photography Monthly, Amateur Photographer,
mhm,
they were fantastic magazines. I remember Amateur Photographer used to have some great spreads in it and really informative articles.
yeah,
I used to keep a scrapbook of stuff that I'd find in those magazines and kind of tear out and then put into plastic folders just to kind of, reread. I guess nowadays, like that's all just bookmarked YouTube videos and what have you. But back then, they were
yeah.
really important for photographers
I,
starting out.
dude, honestly, I remember, but you got to remember, 20 years ago, the internet really was incredibly basic,
Mm.
and
It's mainly
I was,
dancing hamsters.
yeah, predominantly, or mushroom, and I was just trying to, learn as much as I could, and the only way I could really do that and get the technicalities down, this is way before Strobist,
Mm.
was I learned my craft from an old RAF photographer's handbook, or an old Navy, I think it was a Navy photographer's handbook that I had picked up for £4 or £5 in my local charity shop.
Mm.
And that's how I learned. That's how I learned the how cameras worked.
I'm slightly disappointed
Was
there's no ships in your early portfolio then.
well, I actually didn't get to that part of it, so it was too graphic.
Okay.
So, but I'm looking through. I'm actually looking through all this now, and but the editor of Practical Photography at the time was a guy called Ben Hawkins, and lovely Ben and lovely Adam. They were really, really supportive of me in the early days. I think I actually ended up shooting Ben's wedding, bizarrely.
Wow.
Um, but they were so supportive of me, and they would give me features, and then I would write columns for them. And this is 20 years ago, and
Mm.
I was just doing what I enjoyed, and yeah, it was brilliant. It was brilliant fun. I'm looking back at this, and there's people now that I can remember, like Darren Taylor at Roxanne magazine gave me my first ever magazine cover. That was that one.
Nice. Great
Yeah,
cover.
yeah. Thank you. And then, but I then went on to shoot loads of covers. Like they're all here.
Yeah. So I'm
And I mean,
guessing you never
I just
assisted. You just jumped straight in.
jumped straight in. I didn't know assisting was a thing.
Mm.
I'm not even going to lie. I think for the first couple of years of I can tell you actually the first time I met an assistant, right? I had gone to photograph a band called In Flames. Now, I ended up having to do this other shoot for another photographer because he had been involved in a car crash on his way to the shoot.
Oh, well.
He was fine. I checked that first, obviously. But he rung me and was like, look, I've had a really bad prang. I can't get me and the kit to the thing. I hear you're already there and it's a junket day, so they haven't got long. I've missed my slot. Can you help? And I was like, yeah, I can shoot that for you. And he was like, well, my assistant's there. And I was like, wow, a PA. How cool. And he goes, no, he'll help you. And that was the first time I had been aware that there were people who could help you lug all this kit around and like stuff like that. And I was just like, wow, this is cool. And then I continued to do it all myself for pretty much my entire career. But yeah, that was the first time I had understood that there were people who were called assistants and they were assisting.
Wow.
I didn't understand it was a thing. I'm fully self-taught to the point where I wish I had not been fully self-taught.
Mhm.
Because even now, at 20 something years into this game, I'm learning stuff all the time
Yeah.
and going, God, if I had learned that 10 years ago,
Yeah.
even it sounds mad. Even with some of the stuff I've done and the people I've met and the places I've shot, I will still learn some quite basic things every now and then.
Mm.
And you go, if I had spent a year, assisting different photographers, that would have maybe been beneficial.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, shoulda, woulda, coulda. Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Well,
Quite glad I didn't.
yeah,
Kind of regretful I didn't.
there's no straight career path of photography. That's the thing.
No.
It's when people ask you for advice with it, it's like whatever works for you in a way.
Oh, the career paths are hilarious because, like, you say no straight, and assume it's going to be like that. A career path in photography is like whoop, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. Like it's the most wavy career path you could possibly imagine. Plus, also, it's
It's a bit
completely
like watching like blowing a balloon up and letting it go.
yeah, it's exactly that. But hoping that a bigger balloon comes along at some point. It's like, the career, you can plan and you can do all this hard work and you can do everything until you're blue in the face. But it does just also take sometimes that one phone call out of the blue with an amazing dream job that you'd never thought about doing to suddenly go, right, my career is now, boom, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very weird world to choose to go into.
Yeah. So obviously to go back to kind of early on then, you didn't assist, but did you have any particular photographers that were a real influence on you early on in your career?
Yes. And they're the same photographers I always bloody talk about as inspirations because I loved Ouija, right? And I loved David Dubélé. Do you know David Dubélé?
I don't.
The absolute don as far as underwater photography goes.
Okay.
I can't tell
I can
you.
see he's had a big influence on you.
Well, yeah, I've just got my scuba kit. No, I would absolutely love to have him on the show at some point. But as far as like creme de la creme, and bear in mind, almost his entire portfolio is shot on film,
Hmm.
and it is just I I would you I for me, I connected with it at a really early age because I was just like, wow, photography can create that. And I was like, that doesn't look like a photograph. That looks like a painting, and it's just stunning. And I've always loved the David's work. And then obviously you've got people like Leibovitz and things like that. But honestly, truth be told, and regular listeners will know, I'm less connected to the art of our world than you are.
Mm.
You know all these photographers. I still don't. I'm quite I very rarely get to sit down and kind of look out photographers that I like. I did just pick up a lovely book though. Um, this one.
Okay, so to listeners, can you explain what that is
Oh,
and who it's
sorry.
by?
Yeah, that's the Avid 100 book. So it
Oh,
is
nice.
basically a compendium, and then there's also some nice kind of fold out prints and stuff in there as well. As you can see, I haven't opened it yet, but
Yeah.
it's a lot. A friend of mine showed me it. And I was like, this is a lovely book. I have to have it.
I think they're reissuing American West, aren't they?
Are they? Oh,
Yeah.
I would love a copy of that.
Mm.
I would love a copy of that. But yeah, there's it's usual kind of influences for me. But growing up in the early music photography, I and really at the birthplace of sharing your images online is I would see pictures on MySpace or whatever from bands, and I'd be like, "That was cool." Do you know who was really interesting? And I always loved his stuff. Lost loads of jobs to him, and rightly so. Was a guy called Steve Gullick.
Oh, yeah. The name rings a bell. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if
Whenever I lost a job to Steve Gullick, I was like, "Yeah, that's cool." Can't be crossed there. The dude shot Nirvana,
yeah.
and he's like cool work, and he did all this kind of cross processing on film, and I was just like, I really want to learn to do that, but I am going to try and use curves instead, and it would never look as good. Um, and
I think
I was very, I was so, I'll get to why this is later on because there's been some big changes in the past couple of weeks with me, and I'll explain all of that. I'll go into a little bit of detail, not tons, but it's been very interesting to instead of going, "Well, I really like Steve's work. Why am I not shooting on film?" I was always trying to chase the next thing, the next bit of tech, the
mm,
next kind of like thing. I remember going into Kerrang very early in 2005, and I had shot it was my first ever magazine job. So this is before the Rock Sound cover and stuff like this. And actually, I think it's in the portfolio. Is it was the first ever commission that let me unzip this book. It's here. This is here. So I can tell you, 13th of September '05, Real Big Fish
hmm,
at the Octagon in Sheffield. And that was for Kerrang. And I remember that that was the first time I had ever had my name in a byline.
nice.
And I was just like, wow, wow. Like genuinely, I thought at that point, I was like, guys, I've made it. I've bloody made it. Like, I'm retired now. Everything's fine. Um, and I remember at the time going in and going, they were like, can you bring the images in? And I was like, what? No, I'll send them to you. And they're like, what? Are you going to bike them in? And it was one of the first shoots that they hadn't had a photographer shoot it on slide.
Wow.
And I remember going in and seeing the picture editor. I think it was Caroline at the time, and it was super lovely. And I'd never forget that she gave me the first gig. I remember everyone who helped me, and I remember the names of every single person who helped me throughout my entire career. There haven't been a ton, so it's been quite an easy list to
Mm.
remember. But I do always massively, and I'll always give them a shout out whenever I can. But I remember Caroline Fish at Kerrang gave me that job. She also gave me one of the best lessons ever. And I'll talk about that one. But I remember she sent me to do this, and I sent them digital files, and it was basically it was the birth of that. I think I was one of the first people to ever send digital files into Kerrang.
Mm. So what
But she
lesson?
also The lesson, do you know what? I've had brutal lessons. At the time, they've been a gut punch, but actually they've been so incredibly useful. And Caroline gave me one of my very early, I'll get onto Julie's one, because I love Julie very dearly, and I will talk about that. But actually, I might not. I, I'll be careful about that one, because Julie's a dear friend. But Caroline, she said, and because I didn't know how it worked. I was just like, oh, they've sent me one job. Well, I should, And so I think I emailed her like every week, being like, got anything else? I'm your number one number one shoot. I'm not, but in my head, I was just like, well, I've shot for you once, so I now will just shoot for you forever regularly. Didn't understand how any of it worked. And Caroline, I think she just emailed me and was like, hey, Tom, listen, if I've got something, I can send it. But if you're looking for a career or an income from one magazine, I'm afraid we're not it. And I was like, oh, cool. And obviously I was gutted. But at the same time, I was like, oh, is that how it works? I have to work for multiple magazines. Okay, well, I'll reach out to some others. And that was basically the birth of that part of my career. And it was super interesting. And I've always been incredibly grateful to people like Caroline for dishing out that, uncomfortable truth, I guess, because it just spurred me on and helped me understand how it actually worked.
So I guess, yeah, what I'm interested in is what is it then that kept you kind of interested in photography? You know, wh- what does photography mean to you, and how did you kind of maintain that drive?
For a lot of it, believe it or not, it was the tech aspect of it, and also always wanting to be better. I remember when I first learnt about Kaizen. And so everything I always wanted to do, I always wanted to do it a little bit better. And but I think the big thing for photography is genuinely not even maybe the photography. Like, it sounds mad, but I love people and I love being around people. I love chatting to people. And photography is an amazing vehicle to be able to be given this amazing access. And so I have, cheesy though it sounds, I've obviously got two passports. Not obviously, but I've got two passports. So I've always said that the cameras are just another passport. Is they give you access and they drop the guard of the person to a fascinating level. And I love the technicalities of photography. I love actually, shall I just be really honest with you? I don't know how honest are we being with these ones? Are we like going like full brass tacks honest?
Of course.
All right. I was bullied incredibly badly at school, like incredibly badly, to the, not to that point, but it was really bad. I'm not going to say the names of the people who bullied me incessantly. There were a lot of them. And they made my life actual fucking hell for, considerably, I would say maybe my full school career, until I got big. And then in college, I was just like a big dude. And then at uni, I got even bigger. But the thing that always carried me through, and the thing that always was like a constant, a rock, an escape, was the camera. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's still now to this day, when a camera comes up in front of my face, I feel a different. I feel different. I feel that escapism. I kind of like almost, I don't zone out, but I almost become almost like a different personality. And I absolutely love that, almost that feeling of transportation. And it even harks back to, it's effectively my happy place. Like, and going back to like being bullied in school and stuff, like I could put a camera up to my face, and I've got the same thing with riding bike, like riding a mountain bike, right? I've got so much stuff to think about and concentrate on, and think about whether it's the compensation, the exposure, or just how the image is going to look, that all the other stuff, all the bullying, all the incessant, like, just digs, well, they just faded away. Like, they just weren't a thing anymore. And so photography to me is, from a psychological point of view, is the most important thing for me, because it's just like it's a beautiful escape. And even now, I wish maybe that I hadn't done it for a living, and that I had gone off and done something else for a living, so I could still have that pure, untainted version of photography that I had very early on. But at the same time, photography's been an amazing career that I couldn't actually imagine doing anything else. And I've loved every single second of it. So it's, I don't know, it's weird. But the camera coming up in front of my face is just like, I don't know, I feel calm. Everything kind of, all the stress kind of just drains away. That is my kind of, my place that I just love to be.
Mm.
Anyway, that's about as open as I'll get, I reckon.
So what, I mean, with that in mind then, so you start your career, you start going shooting music. What ended up, or at what point did you feel like you shot your dream gig? Or the best job you ever did, and what would be your dream gig now?
There was a very good moment in my career where I remember the bully from school, the worst one, who had made my life the worst experience, because it was nasty, right? But then in college, he had got drunk and got a band's logo tattooed. I then ended up touring with that band. And I remember him drunkenly falling into me in the pub. And I won't say what was said, but anyway, it was a real like, yeah, cool. Like, you know, you're never going to do what I'm now doing. And I then went on to live quite quite an amazing life, really. It's been a journey. And what was it? What was the question? Sorry, I got so het up about the bullying.
So what was the best job, and what would be your dream gig?
Oh man, the best job from any job in my career. Every job's great, Greg. You know that. They've all got their moments. I don't know. There's moments that I'll always remember, like flying, around in a Chinook opposite the defense secretary, and we'd just run a mile with special forces, or we'd run a mile with like the paratroopers, and like run onto the back of an open Chinook as it was like, getting ready to go up, chucking in the ear cheese. Someone throws your helmet, and you hope that you're strapped in. And then there's been moments like, again, another helicopter moment when I've been flying open door over London, and like, there's been so many cool things. I remember going and doing my first ever bus tour in America and like traveling around there. And I remember going and living in a refugee camp in South Sudan when I was doing some work with Médecins Sans Frontières, and that was an incredible experience. I've been into, Jordan and gone into seeing recreate like reconstructive hospitals, and, seen not similar things to what you've done, but kind of that kind of world. And then I've done personal projects where I've taken myself off to, Seoul in South Korea or Indonesia, or kind of all over the world. My latest one, I've just been in Texas after a job back in March doing a big personal project there. I, there, it's cliche, isn't it? I've loved pretty much every single shoot I've ever done. Again, because it comes back to, put a camera in my hand. I am happy. I'm just a happy dude. Like, honestly, I'm very simple, really deep down. Like, honestly, give me a camera and I'm like, yeah, cool, love it. Like, you could put me in the world's worst situation. And I've worked with some like tough people, right? But it doesn't matter. Like, it's not rocket science. It's not brain surgery. Like, what we're doing there, I could have a nice time in an empty room, as anyone as anyone who listens to the show knows, right? Like, I'm fairly straightforward, and it's, I've loved almost every single one. I've only, in my entire career, having done thousands of shoots, I've only really had 2 or 3 unpleasant ones, and that's it. Like, I've been so lucky. But again, I think it comes down to me being, I'm not a chameleon, but I'm very adaptable. So if I walk into a room and I see my subjects feeling quiet or kind of, restrained or something like that. Well, I won't be like, "Whoa, let's be really loud. Whoa," I'll tone it all down. I'm very good at like managing and effectively being a chameleon and almost mirroring the subject's energy.
Mm.
So we always have like a nice time because I very rarely, I don't think I've ever like butted heads with anyone on the shoot. It's just not my character.
Mm.
So I think they've all been great. Obviously, there are some that will always stick in your mind because of what happens. I remember the first time I ever dropped a flash. I remember that shoot pretty much. you know, minute by minute. The helicopter stuff's always cool. When I went out to, you know, uh, you know, these kind of like battleships and the stuff that would be bucket list stuff for a lot of people
Mm.
is really what you and I do on a daily basis. And the celebrity stuff's cool. I love it all, mate. If I'm honest,
What would be your dream gig then?
I honestly, hands down, I'd genuinely love to shoot Obama. Like, I would love to do because I'm now at this like weird kind of like junction in my kind of work. I've been working on a pitch for a job, and I realized that my work's very shadowy, and I want to move away from that. At the same time, I then also want to go off and do some cooler stuff, which will probably end up being more shadowy.
Mm.
And so I'm kind of like at this weird juncture. But I have a bucket list of people that I would love to shoot. But honestly, I almost got the bucket list job a couple of years ago, but sadly the job went away. And they were like, can you travel around the world shooting in, I think it was like 10 or 12 different countries? And can you go off and shoot real people? You're going alone with an assistant. We will just take what you give us. We want you to shoot it like your personal projects. And we'd love a mini film from each subject. You get 2 days with each with each person.
Mm.
And I was like, actually, yeah, that'd be a dream gig, to basically just be like, there you go, there's some money, go off and shoot some personal work and then get it released.
Yeah.
Basically.
So what to talk about personal projects? I mean, what you obviously do quite you invest quite a lot of time in personal projects, and do you think? Well, I mean, what's the optimum amount of time that people should be putting into personal projects? Do you think it's
less than I do? because the problem is for me, the payback, the payoff, and again, it comes back to when that job's done and the shots are edited, I'm like, cool, I'm on to the next thing. Like
Yeah.
that's how I've always been. That's why let's look in my social media folder. So obviously, I've created a workflow that exports files for social media. So I've currently got 450 roughly posts that need to go up on social media. And that's just every time I finish a job, I'm like, yeah, those two will be good. Boom. And they never get posted because I find that side of things just, I don't get any dopamine from it. I don't get the buzz. And by the time I've shot the job and edited the job, those are the bits that I love the most.
Mm.
So I'm on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, the problem is also I've spent now, this job that this personal project that I shot back in March. The edit was huge, took me quite a while, and so we're in June, and the books have just arrived a couple of days ago, and I'm now packing the books. It should have been out a month ago, and it's like it's the problem is when you're busy and trying to get this stuff done, and then you feel like you're working all hours, and then I don't want to burn out, so you just got to try and I don't know. I feel like maybe I spend too much time for the reward I get career-wise from the personal projects, but actually it doesn't matter because the personal projects are purely for me. Because when people are like, oh, you should go and shoot some personal work, it'd be good for your portfolio or whatever. I'm like, all right, cool, personal. It doesn't matter to me what anybody else thinks of it.
Mm.
Personal work for me is not necessarily like, I think, a traditional personal work. I'm like, okay, that's what I want to go and shoot. I will then just go off and shoot it. There's never a goal. There's never a, oh, this would be great for this particular client. I'm like, no, that is how I'm, and I would be so much better and I would be so much further along in my career if I would go off and shoot a project with something in mind.
Be
But
a
that
bit
is
more
just
strategic about it rather than following
yeah,
intuition. Yeah.
of course, 100%. And my intuition is very rarely right, but it's for me. That is me going off into my happy place and just going off and just falling back in love and just loving the job. I think for me, if they if they never accomplish anything from a career point of view, well, that doesn't matter to me because they keep the fire stoked. And that for me is like way more important than if somebody goes, yeah, that shot's great. We want that. I'm like, no, I can technically do whatever you want. These personal though, they're for me because that's the sort of person at the time I was finding interesting,
Mm.
and that there is nothing, there is no ulterior motive in any of that stuff. There's never ever I should target that demographic or anything like that. I'm like, no, that looks cool. I'm going to go off and do it.
So what would you say then is the bit in photography that you of being a photographer that you find the most difficult then? Would it be the
It's
the
the ma-
marketing?
it's the slog.
No,
It's the marketing, it's the slog, it's the constant trying to get jobs. It's the grind.
Mm.
Honestly, I find taking pictures and being on jobs. I love all of that. I love the pre-production, and I love every aspect of the shoot. But it's the I love the post-production. I love doing all that as well. And it it's the marketing, the newsletters, the grind. I get very little back from them. If anything, I get disheartened by them.
Mm.
When you spend weeks or working on a newsletter, and then you put it out and you've either mistimed it because you've accidentally sent it on a Thursday afternoon and everyone's clocked off for the weekend early, or and you didn't clock that it was a bank holiday Friday or something, and or you send out a mailer and let's face it, it's all happened where you then won't get a response. And it's things like that that I probably end up doing less than I should have, because I then just try and avoid the you know the inevitable sense of rejection you get from when you send things out that haven't been as successful as you thought they might be.
Yeah. I mean, that's always that's always the toughest thing to deal with, isn't it? When you just feel like you're screaming into the void sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's funny how like things that you think will land really well don't land, and then stuff that really doesn't interest you, but it's kind of generic or feels generic-ish, you might put out, and people are like, "Oh, I love that," and you're
Yeah.
like, well, "I just don't
Well,
get it."
let's look at some reels I put out. I put out some reels the other day, and I did like a technique one where I like hit the camera, did some like clever transition, and put in a sub drop, and I was like, I'm quite pleased with that. I'll put that up, and I think it got like 20-30,000 views, and I was like, wow, that's pretty good. And then I put up a video of me slapping a newspaper down on the side of a car park and opening it up and being like, I shot this. I'm really pleased with it, and that got 85 or 90,000 views.
Mm.
I got 1,000 new followers from it, and I was like, what? Really? So it's always, I don't know. I maybe worry too much about making things look good to the point where I've missed the boat. And
I'm going to run that experiment next week.
well, you can do a polished one versus an unpolished
No,
one.
I'm going to slap down a newspaper and open it and be like, blah.
Yes, honestly, you'd be surprised at how well it works. But it's I remember and Mona She, when she came on the show, she was an amazing guest. But actually, off air, and I've talked about this multiple times since, so I feel like she has said it,
Yeah.
enough times. But it's here on my Stream Deck. Let me undo my Stream Deck. So I won't cover that one up. But here,
Mm.
I don't know. Can you see that? It says "Done is better than perfect."
Yes.
And I just remember chatting to her after, and she was like, "Tom, you need to just get it out and done."
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, all right, fair enough. She didn't say it quite that deeply, but it was a really important thing, because I was just like, done really is better than perfect, because
Yeah.
perfect,
Another
you'll never
way
get to it.
Another way that I often heard that was if it's 80% right, it's right. And it's
Right.
just basically like if it's good enough, just it's done, get it out.
Yeah.
So
Which is now what I'm doing is that I'm now stopping worrying about what people think of my work, and I'm just scheduling all the posts
yeah.
from the stuff that hasn't gone out, and I'm getting it done, getting it out, getting it sorted.
Mm,
And actually, it feels much better just getting rid of it.
mm.
So yeah, it's an interesting one.
What's your kind of bread and butter for bringing in work these days?
I I don't know if I have a one consistent stream of bread and butter, because I think I would probably have 3 or 4 different streams of bread and butter.
Mm,
I do B2B, I do TV, I do editorial. I do headshots every now and then, because I'm not snobby. I don't care. Like, I'll talk about it as well. Like, you know, all these, I know there's people who'll do it and not talk about it. I'm like, nah, I'm cool. Like, I'm proud to, be working as a photographer. I tip my hat to so many different areas of work. So, but I think that the parts that I maybe enjoy the most out of the regular work are the TV and the editorial
mm.
stuff, because they're always fun, they're always interesting, and they're always a bit of a challenge. And
Yeah.
I love a challenge. Even still 20 something years into the career, I will love the editorial and the TV stuff, because they'll throw up something,
Mm,
guaranteed. Like, there'll always be something that chucks up. And on the bigger shoots I do, well, we're all pros who've been doing this a really long time, so you'd be surprised. Things don't come up so much on those bigger jobs, because everyone's been doing it so long,
mm.
and there's just more budget to be more prepared for things, and,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. Whereas on the kind of the run and gun stuff, there's always something that you kind of have to come up against. And I do love
Production's
that.
the big thing, isn't it? Like, when you've got a
Yeah.
decent producer or a decent production team on a job, then
Yeah.
they can foresee potential problems and head them off at the pass
Yeah.
before they become an issue. Whereas, yeah, editorial is just its very nature. It's just hiccup after hiccup. So much of it
Yeah.
out of your control, and it becomes a very reactionary way of working.
Hmm. Yeah. And I
But
mean,
it
I quite,
hones your instincts.
oh yeah, and I the skills I've learned over the years of doing all the music work and the editorial and TV and all that kind of stuff, I use them every single bigger job that I do.
Mm,
Even when there's stuff over there, you can see things happening long before they happen, so you can head things off. It's just, I think a lot of the confidence just comes down to experience, and when you've done it for a really long time, we just don't get phased by a lot of stuff.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, well, no, that's cool. We can just work around it. You know.
So it brings us on to kind of our final question, really, which we have, which is, what are your, I mean, it's not a little one, unfortunately. What are your thoughts on the future of photography?
Oh. Um. Yeah. I I would love to be really positive about it, and I feel that in a few years I might be able to.
Mm,
I just feel that there will be a big swing back to wanting authenticity and
yeah,
wanting things done in person, and I think there will be. I would love to see a resurgence in zines and print, as people want something that's not you know kind of generated slop and stuff like that. I feel that there's going to be a big swing after we've had this big swing. Everyone seems to be big swinging. Obviously, AI is the new kind of, very exciting tech as far as a lot of businesses are concerned. And I can totally see a lot of the advantages. And I use it, a lot of time in the back end of my business to do the stuff that I absolutely hate doing.
mm,
But would I use it to generate imagery? Not with my name on it.
mm.
And it's, I feel that the I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be positive, I guess, is the right thing. I feel that we're just going to have a bit of a swing too far, and then it'll swing back and correct itself. Now, what the state of the industry is will obviously depend on how long that swing back takes.
Mhm.
But I've, over the past couple of weeks, have had more and more pitches come in to me asking me to do treatments, but with AI backgrounds
Right.
and stuff like that. So it'll be really interesting to see how that kind of goes and how that ends up working out. But I do hope that there's going to be a swing back in the medium future to, wanting to do things in real life and kind of get as many. But the trouble is, compared to 20 years ago, we're asked to produce so much now in a day versus what we were doing, and it's photography is a tough job. Like it's hard work, and I'm seeing people bow out of the industry and go back. Some people are going back to regular jobs, or some people are changing completely. It's a worrying yet fascinating yet um, uncomfortable time for a lot of people.
Mm.
And so I know, as well as with the AI, you've got, the perfect storm of, less optimal financial kind of situations in the global
Yeah.
economy, really, as well as various markets. You've got people who are worried about marketing budgets, and it's like a bit of a perfect storm. So I hope when things settle and things kind of hopefully right themselves a little bit more, that there'll be a bit of a swing back.
Mm. Yeah. Phew. Well, I mean, that's a topic that we'll continue to come on to on future shows, especially with our guests. I mean, that's one of the great things about getting the guests that we have on is just getting their opinions and their takes on these things, because everyone is coming at it from a different angle and a different view.
Mhm.
Um,
That
but
was me trying to have a positive view on it.
yeah,
So I can be very realistic about it, but I would love to be doing my job forever.
yeah,
So that's my I would like that to be what happens.
I would like that to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a nice thing. So, but
Excellent.
yeah, I know we didn't get to some of the questions, but I also am aware that of the time creeping on.
Well, we will
So
continue to. We will maybe tackle the questions in the next fireside. The extra questions that we had from the patrons.
yeah,
Um,
apologies. I was so thrilled that I have found my first ever portfolio. So that took up a little bit more time. So apologies.
well, we've got some excellent episodes coming up. We have some fantastic insight, actually. I don't want to give it away, but we've got a guest who's agreed to come on that's going to give us a kind of lowdown on the nuts and bolts of how to the business side of photography, which I think will be really useful to listeners. So please do head over to the YouTube page and subscribe if you haven't done so already, because that really helps bump our numbers up. If you visit our Patreon, that's also really helpful. If you consider becoming a patron of the podcast, you can get to join our WhatsApp group, which has a really active community of people that are constantly helping each other out and seeking advice. But that's a really thriving community at the moment. And yeah, until next time, look after yourselves. And
And
thank you, Tom.
no, thank you. I was going to say, actually, you're
You went
quite.
all gushy then,
I
like a
know.
little
Sorry.
schoolgirl.
Thanks, Greg. No, it was good. It's awkward, isn't it?
It is, but
Yeah. So
we
I
put
hope it was
we
in.
put our
I hope.
guests through it, so it's only
Yeah.
fair that we do it ourselves.
Well, I think maybe we should have done this early on. I think I would have been considerably more sympathetic
Tom, you are
to.
ever eloquent, and your insight is always interesting. And I think your breadth of experience is something that makes this show so special. So,
Oh, bless you, mate. Well, that's very kind. Do you know what's funny? Do you know what's frustrating is that we didn't even get on to the time I was endorsed by a hard drive company and did actual marketing
I
materials for
remember
them.
seeing those.
Yeah, that was cool.
Do you have the life-size cutout of yourself somewhere still?
I did somewhere. It was from a trade show, and I was like, "You got the height wrong." Um, but yeah, no. At some point, I don't drink anymore. But maybe get me a lime cordial, and I can spell the tea. Spell the tea. Spill the tea. Because yeah, I feel like we've touched on like 3% of the stories,
Yeah, yeah.
if that. So, but thank you. I appreciate it. It was a lovely experience. We should do more of these.
We will. I'm sure. I'm sure.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week.